Brian, thank you for joining me today on Pop Culture Unplugged.
Thanks for having me.
Exciting times, our friend. We have Cobra Kai season six, part two that's out now. Part three comes out in a few weeks. I can't
Mhm.
wait till we jump into the whole Young Miyagi thing. I'm sure it was a very exciting time for you.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Yeah, it kind of came very quickly. The audition came and so initially, the audition wasn't for young Miyagi. It was kind of this, no name character, new character, and the odd thing is when you do get an audition from Cobra Kai, it doesn't come Cobra Kai. It comes with a code name. It's called the Arborist.
Mm.
So this one came Cobra Kai, which was kind of like, well, that's weird, But I was like, okay, that's cool. But the role was, yeah, it was like a Japanese, I guess, sensei or some sort of like coach at a tournament, and it wasn't even like Sekai Taito, which is a tournament. And then Daniel hears him teaching one of his pupils, and he's like looking around, and he's like, "Who is that?" And sees the character, the guy auditioning comes out, and he just says, "You remind me so much of my old sensei." And then they talk, and then there's a little bit of like Miyagi-isms in there. So if you're looking at it and you're familiar with the Karate Kid, you're like, okay, I could see what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're doing like a Miyagi-esque character, but it wasn't him. So sent that in, and that was, man, I want to say either at the end of March or the beginning of April. Um, and it was pretty far ahead of like when the actual shoot dates. So when you get auditions, you get outside dates,
Yeah.
and it was pretty far. So I was like, okay. And I remember that one because right after that, my wife and I we got COVID for the first time. So yeah, and so it must have been kind of coming. She already was feeling a little sick, and I was okay, but then later on, it was like I think I would say like a night after that, I sent an audition. I started feeling sick, so I was like, man. So I was hoping that they weren't gonna call anytime soon because I was out of commission. And then it was like a week before the first outside date, and I was like, oh, I probably didn't get it, which I was like, yeah, that sucks. And then I felt like this would be a really good role. And then like a couple days before the outside date, I get this email from my agent. They're like, oh, you booked it. I'm like, great, but it wasn't like, oh, they just said you booked it. So it wasn't like, oh, you got Mr. Miyagi. I was like, awesome, cool. And then it seemed like maybe a couple of days after that, it was just like, oh, just to confirm, this is not for the role of whatever you audition for. This is actually young Mr. Miyagi. And then that's when I was like, whoa, okay. So they're not even doing like, oh, this is like a character that's kind of like him. They're actually, this is going to be him. But there
Mm.
was no script, there was nothing attached. I had no idea what I was doing. Um, I just assumed it was similar to the audition, but the actual scene was just made up and had nothing to do with the show.
No.
So yeah, and it really didn't like even like right now, I'm still kind of like not in shock, but it's still very surreal that people associate me with such an iconic character. But
Right.
yeah, it was incredible news. I mean, that's like an understatement, but
Yeah. Well, the
um,
fans
but
loved it. The reaction was
yeah,
the reaction's been great on it.
that's great, and that's the only thing really that was like the biggest scare, anything that was like, oh my God, like you're looking at this mountain, you're like, okay, you're playing Miyagi, you know, and obviously, this is Pat Morita's character.
Yeah.
Like he made Mr. Miyagi, like literally he made Mr. Miyagi because if it wasn't for him, he probably would have just been like a very one-dimensional character, just your typical wise Asian man, but he really gave the Miyagi character depth, backstory. So to step into that role is, yeah, it was like, oh my God. And at the same time, it's like, what are the audience, what's the fan base going to get?
Right.
I'm also a fan of Cobra Kai too. So I was putting myself in those shoes and be like, if I were to walk out on screen, what would I have to do that people weren't going to be like, what the heck is that? Like, who's that
Right.
guy? You know?
A lot of
So
pressure. A lot of pressure.
very much so. Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
So,
So, uh, so were you a big fan of like the Karate Kid movies, like even before joining the series? And you said
oh
you watched the
yeah,
series also. I think everybody
oh
loves it.
yeah.
I don't think I've met anybody that doesn't like the Karate Kid.
Exactly. The only one I haven't seen, I mean, prior to booking the role was the next Karate Kid. I just couldn't find it. I couldn't get it. And all the socials, I mean, the streaming sites didn't have it at
Yeah.
the time. But I did watch everything. It's funny because when I was younger, I actually met Pat first
Okay.
before I saw, the Karate Kid. My mom used to work in downtown LA, Tokyo. So everybody sort of knew everybody down there. So I met a lot of these Japanese American actors who I didn't know were actors at the time. I was like 5 or something. And I met Pat Morita, I met like Mako, I met all these other people. And I just figured they were my mom's friends. Like, just my people my mom knew.
Yeah.
And then when I watched The Karate Kid, I was looking, I was like, that guy looks like Pat. My mom's like, that is Pat. I'm like, that's not Pat. He doesn't talk like that. He sounds completely different. He's like, no,
Yeah.
that's Pat. He's an actor. And I was like, what? And like, so that's him? And he's like, yeah. So it was like this weird, thing. And then finally I'm like, oh, I get it. All right, he's playing a character.
Mm.
But yeah, Karate Kid was a big part of growing up. I mean, just being Japanese American and especially going and wanting to be in this industry, there wasn't a lot of characters you can really look up to and be like, yeah,
Mm.
I can look up to him. I could be me. I mean, even though he was a much older character, I believe he was like the very first one that really broke out and became very iconic, and it wasn't a stereotype. Um, I mean, he kind of was, but in a good way, where like there was still more to him than just like I am white, I am, they gave him everything that any Japanese and Japanese American person could be, right? He
Yeah.
he knows martial arts, he fishes, he's also gardening, all that kind of stuff. But because of Pat's great performance, all of that made sense, all that fit. It wasn't
Mm.
just like cliche. So yeah, big fan of the Karate Kid, big fan of Cobra Kai since the beginning when it was on YouTube Red. Yeah, and it's just surreal to be part of this world now. So-
Do you have a favorite character in the movies or in the series?
oh yeah, well in
Other
the
than the young
movie,
Miyagi.
yeah, in the movies, obviously to me, it's Mr. Miyagi. I mean, because he's just cool. Like not
Yeah.
only is he someone that is looks like he can solve all your problems, he just seems like a really cool
Mm.
guy. He's really down to earth. He's funny. He knows how to protect people he cares about. Um, in the show, it's a toss up. I mean, I who doesn't like Daniel, but like I think really, Johnny, like William Zabka's character, really just makes that show. If it wasn't for
Mm.
his character and the way they created him, the way they wrote him, because he's like the funny guy to the straight guy, right?
Yeah.
He's like Daniel's funny guy. So and it comes so naturally, like Billy has such a um, I don't know, it's like a natural way of just delivering the line. It doesn't seem forced. He knows that character very well. And then just his arc from season 1 to season 6 of like how he's growing and all that stuff like that. It really works. So yeah, Johnny's one of the top ones, but all those characters are great.
Right,
Like
right.
Miguel, Chosen Hawk, all those guys are awesome. I guess the second one would be Tori. I like
Mm.
Tori's character
So do
because
I.
yeah, she just seems like I mean, everything bad happens to her, like she never could catch a break. But um, I think because I'm an actor, I enjoy those type of characters, like the struggle. Yet she still perseveres. You know, I honestly think out of everybody there from the young cast, if anyone were to become like a Miyagi at the end, it would be her because she knows pain, she knows trauma, she knows, but she still is able to persevere, so she can learn from that and hopefully teach someone who's younger than her later on uh, in her life. So
So you booked this role of a young Miyagi. How do you like mentally prepare to play this role? And like how often did you go back to watch the originals or just like
Oh,
highlights of
yes.
Pat?
I immediately went back and watched everything. And
Yeah.
just to be like, okay, I need to get these. You know, growing up, Japanese American and Asian American, and me and my friends, we all did the Miyagi voice, right? It's just you just know how to do it.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between doing it for your friends and doing it for fun. And then you're like, okay, I actually got to do this now. So,
Mm,
I went back and I watched, everything I could get my hands on just to see the mannerism, just the way he, you know, the cadence, the way he enunciates things. It's not a Japanese accent. I think most people who know how to do it, they know that it's not a Japanese accent. Even in the audition, after I got the tape and everything, it's filming it. I got a note from the producer saying like, please don't do a Japanese accent. It has to be a very specific Miyagi accent. Um, so that note came, and I'm sure it went out to everybody. But in my mind, I was like, if you don't know what a Miyagi accent is, you probably shouldn't be auditioning for this role because like it's very specific.
yeah.
And so that's the first thing I went just like, okay, I got to get that down. And of course, there's like very iconic scene where he's actually showing Daniel like all the stuff he's doing was like, you know, meant for the karate training. So it's like, like, show me sando floor, and it's like
Yeah.
that cadence of like instead of like show me sando floor, it's not it. There's a very specific way of he's saying it. His things were in like when Daniel like actually like tries to go down the ground, he's like ah, da, 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 they tell me all that kind of stuff. I was like, okay, I got to absorb all that, because I have no idea what I'm actually going to be saying. I didn't have the script
Mm,
yet and nothing. Um, so when all that came, when the scene and everything came, I was like, okay, there's actually all the lines I was saying was in Japanese. Everything was in Japanese except for the very last line where the CG of Pat came up. That was in English. So I was like, okay, so I'm not actually going to be able to do any of the stuff that I was like learning because it's all in Japanese. Because even if you try to do that in Japanese, it's that cadence and all that stuff's gonna be gone because he's actually speaking in his native tongue. It's gonna be very fluid. So I really worked on the very end where he's like, talking to Daniel and it's Mr. Miyagi's face. But again, at the same time, I didn't know what they were going to do. It's all just in the lines in the just in the stage directions of what might be happening. So it only became English on the day of. Like I was doing
mm.
everything in Japanese, and then off the side, I think one of the directors was like, "Hey, can we get an English line?" And I was like, sure, let's do an English one." So I guess that's the one that you ended up using. So, but mentally, it was just that. It was just trying to get the essence of Mr. Miyagi because I wasn't trying to do a duplication or a mimic of Pat's performance. Like you can't do that. That's in its own right. That's something that can never be copied. So it's just taking that and paying homage to it and be like, okay, now what am I going to bring to the table? Right? What's the components of Miyagi that we haven't
Yeah.
seen before that I can actually show in this 2 minutes scene when it's my turn to up and be at the bat. So
It's awesome. What about like his backstory now that we get to see the younger version of him like through the clips and everything? Like for you as an actor, like do you get excited when you're about to jump into those scenes?
oh yeah, definitely, definitely. I mean, going into it, I saw all that stuff, and see in part one, after I shot everything.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, interesting. Because like they didn't have any of that backstory for me, like nothing. It
Okay.
was
Wow.
just that one episode. Um, and that's it, So I going into it, like they had me take a picture of the passport, like, so that was the only thing I was like, okay, there's gonna be a passport. But for me, because I not only know, the story of, the Karate Kid, I know where a lot of the people who have gone through the things that Mr. Miyagi supposedly went through.
Yeah.
I know people who went through camp. I know people who were in 442nd. I know people whose stories, aren't told after the war and how much struggle and racism and all that stuff they faced. So just knowing that, it just gave me a lot of backstory to, kind of get into the mindset of this character. Even though this version of Mr. Miyagi, I want to make it absolutely clear, and I think it's brilliant the way the writers did it. It's a dream.
Right.
So if you really look at it canonically, this is not what Mr. Miyagi was. Like, this is just Daniel's interpretation of what he is. I remember sitting in the this is just a little tangent, but sitting in the makeup chair with the hair stylist, and at the time when I was in Atlanta, I had long hair. I kind of had this long, kind of like Miyagi, yes, kind of long hair. And this the stylist is like, "That's perfect. That's we're just gonna leave it like that." I was like, "Okay, cool." And then later on, right before they shoot, they're like, "No, you got to cut your hair." They change your mind, they cut your hair. And he was saying, he's like, I don't think he would have hair like that, like the stylist. And I was like, it's probably right because he kind of came after war. Maybe his
Yeah.
hair would maybe be a little longer, or it might be even shorter because like he's coming after war. But he's like, this is what they want, so we're gonna do it. So they gave me this 1940s style haircut, very nice, and it was actually great because I was like, I got a free haircut. I was looking to get a haircut anyway, so but then looking at the scene, I was like, you know what? This makes a lot of sense because this is Daniel's dream. So he's never seen Mr. Miyagi without any facial hair. Is as far
Right.
as I know. Like I don't think he's seen, the Julie Pierce, photo of him, like, like all that stuff. And he's probably seen people in, the 1940s or 1950s pictures and having this hairstyle. Even the location is just his fabrication of it. It probably wasn't even that. We don't actually know what all that stuff looked like because it's all through Daniel. So that gave me a lot more creativity and a lot more freedom to really portray this character, knowing that, okay, this is a dream. Coming in, there's only three lines, right? So you have to make every single thing count. Um, so that's what it was. I was like, okay, what's the whole purpose of this dream? Yeah, and then to me, it was like, okay, his mind is telling him, hey, you gotta, you gotta wake up, man. You're floundering. And I don't know any of the story prior to it. I'm just assuming that he's in like some really bad state and he's not focusing. He's probably putting people that he cares for, at jeopardy. So of course, this is why he's in his dream. Mr. Miyagi has to come back in and teach him another lesson. But unfortunately for Daniel, he doesn't learn lessons through just talking. He needs to have it like pounded into him. Like if you just
Yeah.
watch every single Karate Kid movie, he learns a lesson by getting into fights. So it's like, oh, it's perfect. He's fighting his mentor. He's asking him, I don't get the lesson. What are you trying to teach me? And he's like, that's the point. You're not getting it. You got to wake up. So I was like, okay, then that gives me carte blanche to be, not mean, but kind of ruthless in the scene to be like, this is what he needs. And of course, you can't really change the scene anyway. The course of it. So, but it would have been weird if I was kind of like nice to him while I'm saying it's like, no, this is just like, this Miyagi, does not like this guy, and but at the same time, the lines are there because it's his own psyche being like, dude, like I don't know what you're doing, but you got to wake up, you got to shake yourself out of this. So, um, yeah, like all that kind of stuff. It's just uh, you prepare as best as you can, and then you just let it all go, and then when you're on the set, you just kind of do what you're doing.
Right.
So.
For you now, what do
Um,
you think? What do you think was like the biggest challenge now with this?
Honestly, the challenge was what you brought up in the beginning, where it's just how the fan base was going to
Okay.
react.
Yeah.
Like I mean, you're given the best opportunity when you're on set, right? You got everybody there. I mean, I'm in the scene with Ralph Macchio. Like that's like that in itself is like awesome, right? You
Mm.
can't do anything better than that. But it's really just a kind of a crapshoot. Like you could do all that stuff, you put it out there, but it's really how the audience is going to take it. So, I kind of got a little inkling because I was talking to another person who was doing the interview too, and he's like, "So you think like when they were watching you it was like kind of a second audition for something else?" I was like, "Yeah, it's most likely because they're putting their trust into me, right?" And then just another little backstory. Like I was supposed to be in Atlanta for 2 weeks.
Uh,
That was my outside dates, and I'm assuming it's because they needed the time to get me up to speed or just like learn the choreography, all that stuff. Unfortunately, I didn't have those 2 weeks. I had a conflict, and I tried to get out of it. I was like trying to get out the other project, and then they're like, "No, we can't." So, I was actually like, "Man, I might not get this anymore," because like they might be like, "Oh, we're going to go with someone else because you can't make it." And I was like, "Damn." So, and it's always like my luck. I always have something, and then of course something else comes in, and I'm like, "God damn it!" But luck was on my side, and they were like, "You know what? We could move up your or not move up. We can delay your flying date, but you're only going to have 2 days to learn everything. Can you do it?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And I'm
Or
like, "Of course I can." I'm like, "Well,
right.
okay." And that literally was just 2 days. So coming in, I flew into Atlanta on Monday. I went from the airport to the set. I went straight to the stunt dojo, and I was like, "Hey, met Dom," and I was like, "Hey, I know I'm early, but do you guys have any sort of like previs or anything with fight?" And they're like, "No, we don't." And I was like, "Oh, okay." He's like, "Yeah, dude, we have so many fights." And they were right in the middle of, I think, choreographing that big brawl
The
scene
big
at the end.
brawl. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was like, I didn't know that, but I was like, "Oh, okay." And they're like, "Yeah, we're so swamped, man." And we're like, "We didn't even expect to see you today. We were supposed to come here tomorrow." So like, don't worry, tomorrow we'll have everything. So they did everything to, I guess in that day. I came back, learned the choreography, and I just worked it. And my arms and everything were all bruised up. So just keeping that in mind, right? I'm walking into set. They're like, "This guy who was supposed to be here for 2 weeks, he's only had 2 days. I hope we got the right guy. I hope, we're not just wasting our time." Right. So we're coming in, there's like this tension, right? Everyone's kind of like, "Okay, all right, that's the guy. All right, let's see what he got."
Mm.
But the biggest, I guess, relief I got was it was a very dark set, so I don't actually know who was in there. I was really only talking to Ralph because he was just right next to me the whole time. But he turned to me. He's like, "I gotta tell you, man." He's like, "This scene, you give me goosebumps. Like when I'm listening to you, when I'm it feels like Pat. It feels like I'm back with." And I was like, "Wow, like really?" He was like, "You got his voice down, you got his spirit down." He's like, "I don't know how you did it, but like it's great." And that was like, okay, well, at least one of the executive producers and also Ralph Macchio's signing off on. And then again, he could just be being really nice to me. I don't know, but I can tell in his performance too that I'm hoping that because he felt that way, he was able to let go.
Yeah.
He's the executive producer, right? He has
Right.
all these things on his mind because even before we shot it, he was like, say, "Oh, what's the next thing going to be? Okay, I got to go change it to that. I got to go do this. Was that taken care of?" And he's a boss, right? But to be able to put that aside and just be Daniel in that scene, I'm hoping that I helped them with because he was able to relate. There's actually a couple takes where when he's talking to me, he's crying,
I
in
think
the
I
scene.
read that somewhere.
Yeah, he started to tear up, and he's like, and I was like, "Oh wow," and of course, and me, I'm like geeking out, and but I'm still in the character. But I obviously they didn't use those takes, but yeah, he was like tearing up, and that's just having Ralph be a great actor. The second one was like I got a message from the AD saying that Billy or William Zach was watching. He's like, I guess he goes, "I want you to tell him, I guess we got the right guy because he did a great job." So I was like,
Wow.
"Awesome," so we got William, man. So, that's the biggest thing. And I was like, those guys liked it. Okay, the next step were the fans like it. And, it's just, yeah, the fans have been great. I would say for the most part, it's been a very positive response to the portrayal. So, yeah,
Yeah.
thank you guys for
That's
that.
amazing. I know that the fans loved it. Now the big question is all they're talking about all these like prequels and spin-offs. Would you
Mhm.
jump back? Would you jump on that if they tell you, "Hey,
Oh,
let's do
of,
this"?
of course. Yeah, it would
Has there been
be.
any talks or anything? Could you tease anything?
No, there's been nothing. Honestly, it's just
Yeah.
exactly what everyone else is seeing. I've been reading the articles, I've been reading all this. So the only thing that I got, and again, this is just, you know, rumors on the crew is like the tension in the room when I was doing it was there apparently. Because afterwards one of the stunt people came up to me. It was like, "You did such a great job. You did awesome." He's like, it was good because there's talk about possibly a prequel, and that wouldn't have been a reality if you didn't do a good job here. And all of a
Mm,
sudden they were like, "You did great, so there could be a one." So that was the
Yeah,
only thing that I heard. I was like, okay, great. So that means that everyone was happy that there's a, it was a green light on that one, to be like, okay, so he could possibly do this if we wanted to. But there has been no, like, no one's
yeah,
reached out to me, no one's talked to me. It's just everything that, like, articles and things like that. And I'm with the fan base. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that something would happen. The only thing I would say is if we're gonna do a Mr. Miyagi story, right? It has to be done right because
yeah,
it's a very specific story to a specific group of people, which is the Japanese Americans, and that experience, uh, just to be completely honest, there has not been a lot of like mainstream stories for that experience. We have a couple of them, but nothing to this, this major, story coming out. That the character Mr. Miyagi reaches so many people that it would be such a great vehicle to tell these stories. Even people who have no idea what, internment camp or Manson or 442nd, if they have no idea what that is, they'll still watch it because it's Mr. Miyagi, right? And
right.
then to give those people this story to be like, oh my God, I didn't know this happened. I am a second generation Japanese American. My parents came from Japan after the war. So I personally don't have family members that went through camp or but I know a lot of people who I call family, friends, close people to me that have been through that, and they tell you these stories because you're part of the family, right? They don't just like tell the story. And of course, there's people who now share their story because they want other people to know. But it has to be in that vein. Like it has to be, and unfortunately, it's probably going to be a very sad story. I don't think it's going to have a happy ending because if you look at the whole story as like a big picture kind of sense, the happy ending comes in Karate Kid 2, not Karate Kid 1, in Karate Kid 2 when he actually
Goes back to
forges
this.
that relationship, yeah,
Yeah,
with Daniel when
mm,
Mr. Miyagi's father passes away and he had that scene in the beach and he's like, okay, yeah, this not only is he my friend, like, I could see him as like my legacy, my son, if you want to call him that. So the story prior to that, yeah, there's not going to be any sort of like happy ending. It might be like a plateau of like hope,
yeah.
right? And then you know like okay, that's going to lead to the movies in the 80s, so like we know where that's going. It's very kind of like similar to like Star Wars in a way, but in a flip version. Like the other interview I had, we're kind of talking about how that's like Anakin's way, but it was like a flip. Like
That's an
we
interesting
know
thing. Yeah,
yeah, we know he becomes Darth Vader, so we're like, oh, but this time we know he becomes the Mr. Miyagi we all love and recognize. So it's like okay, there's kind of a happy ending to that, but the story itself is probably going to be pretty sad. So
what
but
the
I would
what
definitely do it.
yeah, and what's crazy, like the fans, they're waiting for part three to drop because they want to see more of the whole story that they're doing on the side,
Yeah,
also for Miyagi and why he was at the
yeah.
tournament and what happened. Also,
Exactly. Yeah, part three, like I guess, like I said, like I don't know what they're doing for part three at all, and I would be completely honest with you guys, like so I'm in the same boat as you. I'm
yeah,
waiting to see what they're gonna do. So, but yeah, I also heard that too, where part three is gonna be setting up a lot of. Not only is it going to be setting up for concluding the story of like Cobra Kai, but it's going to be probably setting up a lot of other like maybe spin-off type things. So
right.
if I'm assuming that if they're going to do something to continue that story on, it's not going to be complete. It's just going to be like another mystery to be
Mm.
like, okay, well, let's explore this in a show or in a film or whatever, right? I mean, if I was writing it, that's what I would do. I wouldn't give you a definitive answer in that one. I would make you want more to be like, okay, let's watch another show about this. But yeah, they're very they keep everything very close to the chest, so and I'm a newcomer to the Cobra Kai. So like it's not like I was like privy to anything. I literally was there for 4 days and then I flew out. So
But your name will
I'm
always be
very
attached to
smart.
it, so which is great.
Yeah, that's the great thing where everyone's like, dude, like it doesn't really hit you until other people tell you how big it is for me. They're like, oh my God, like you're like this is history now. Like you are now the only other person besides Pat Murray to play Mr. Miyagi. And I was like, yeah, I guess so. I haven't really thought of it that way, but
Uh,
yeah, you look up on then the Wikipedias, and they like, there's my name, there's my picture now. It's like,
Right.
oh, that's cool. All right, yeah.
What's next for you, Brian? Anything you could tease about before we end this interview? Is there
Um,
any other projects you got
yeah,
coming out?
I do have a project I've been working on. I can't say too much about it because there's another NDA, but all I can say is it's probably not going to be coming out until 2027.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, it's an ongoing thing. So it's a really cool project. Looking forward to seeing people get into it. But that's I think anybody who is in the know of like how long something would take to get to
Yeah.
production might get a guess on what it is. But I at this point, like I'm okay with saying that because I'm not really giving it away. But as it gets closer to it, I think I'm gonna be able to get more stuff out. But yeah, it's
Amazing.
really cool. It's been keeping me busy. And of course, if anything comes with this,
Right.
Miyagi thing, that would be great too.
Which I think
That
everybody wants to see. So hopefully
yeah.
they'll decide to do something. Brian, how can the viewers and listeners and the Cobra Kai fans find you on social media to keep up with you?
Sure. You can look at underneath Instagram. It's the underscore Brian underscore Takahashi. If you just put the underscore Brian, that should be the first thing that pops up. You can see this mug on there. But yeah, you can jump on there and send me a comment or a message, and I try to respond back to everybody. So
Amazing. Brian, I want to thank you for giving me a few minutes today. Good luck with your career, the projects, and hopefully we'll see a Miyagi down the road.
thank you. Yes, same here. And then if I am, hopefully we jump back on this
We'll
one
jump
and
back on. We'll do it again. Yeah.